Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one nurture us, may that one protect us both. May we work conjointly with great energy and vigor. May our studies also be engaged with great energy and vigor. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So I welcome you to the Bhagavad Gita series. And I took up as a theme earlier the idea of freedom, because it struck me that the passages that we are about to study are all to do not only with freedom, but how to get it. And so I have taken out Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. Also, he has a whole lecture called Freedom of the Soul that might also shed light on the subject. But this morning, it's my habit, as you know, to give out some thoughts. And today's thought would be appropriate on the question of freedom. And so I want to read out what was there. And after a verse, I might stop for us to contemplate what the meaning is. So it goes like this: surrounding space of infinite sky, eagle glides with broad wingspan. Such sights will make us question why. For a freed state we scheme and plan. See, the idea is that everybody is looking for freedom. Freedom is one of the highest ideals we have. There's every reason why we always look for it in society. We look for social freedom. Freedom and justice, these are the two things. But nobody wants to be bound. The great evidence of this is a small child, age 2. They look for their freedom. Anybody knows who studies how children grow will start with the idea they're quite happy to have the freedom to move arms and legs, just a limited amount of freedom there. But by the age of 2, they're in exploratory mode. They're using their hands and knees and crawling, and they get used to the parents' admonition twofold: no and don't touch. But the child is in exploratory mood. It wants to adventure. And you see this cross-crawl movement, as we call it, where the right arm is put out, or the right hand is put out, and the left knee is put back, and so it goes on in alternate movements, is incredibly valuable for a child's brain development, because it learns to coordinate 2 hemispheres of the brain. And it's in doing this, it's exercising its freedom to know more. You and I learning a language will take us a long time. We find it quite difficult as we grow older. But a child learns a whole new language in a mere few years. Brand new language with verbs and nouns. It may not structure it that way. It may not understand it that way, but it fully knows how to communicate. The brain is so pliable, immediately absorbs a huge urge forward in its growth. But what we see is that it is exercising its freedom despite the admonitions no and don't touch. Still the child puts the exploratory hand out to the glass vase. And so it's exercising its freedom of choice to defy any of these admonitions, because the urge to know is stronger, and we can only do that when we have some freedom that we can exercise and choose. And the aspect of choosing comes with the child more and more and more as it develops and grows. In my opinion, one great mistake that parents might make is to ask the child to choose unnecessarily. That is, do you want, this is how questions are phrased, do you want this and do you want that? And then the child develops a whole range of wants and then becomes demanding, pulling on the mother or the father, the mother's skirt or the father's jacket. He says, I want this, I want that. Looking at something, I want it, I want it. And then when the parents say, no, you can't have it, the child then, of course, gets upset and starts bursting into tears. But the background to it is confusion. You told me there was a choice. You told me that, you asked me, what do I want? And then when I say what I want, then the tables turn a little bit. You're not so happy with that. Child becomes a nuisance. So this question of free will is a question that is debated by philosophers from time immemorial. Do we have free will? Is life a deterministic thing? Now, this 13th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, tells us that the cause of everything in nature is nature. The cause of anything that is physical is nature itself. Nature is deterministic. It has as one of its principles and laws cause and effect. It was the Sankhya's who saw the cause and effect as a kind of difference in manifestation. It's the same thing in different forms. That the effect is nothing but the cause. The cause is nothing but the effect. This goes on and on and on perpetually. And so the Sankhya system is evident here in this Bhagavad Gita, the 13th chapter, that says that these two principles of life, previously described as Kshetra, Kshetrajna, field and the knower of the field, also called Purusha and Prakriti, these are two things which seem to be separate. And therefore, the cause of the one is separated from the cause of the other in a sense. In a sense because they're integrally connected. Why? Because they're two aspects of the same thing. But the Sankhya tells us that if you have a wave, the peak is preceded by a hollow, and the hollow is preceded by a peak, and Vedanta adds to it, yes, of course, isn't it the same ocean? So the same ocean is there, and that the fundamental level at depth is this knower, this thinker, this witness, all in one. And then when it connects to its own projection of Prakriti, we see it as a unity and we get confused. Our confusion leads to restrictions. We think it's all nature. We think there's nothing more than nature. If you take it to its extreme, there are reductionist materialists who say we are only chemicals. But as I said last week, probably, that from inert chemicals, you can't get a conscious thinking being. You can't get an ant crawling just because chemicals were there. No rock goes and decides to get up while we sleep and, unbeknown to us, march to the other end of the countryside. We don't find it. So we find all these levels of consciousness there in the universe. And as we grow in increasing sophistication, we find this unfolding. This is the Vedantic, the yoga and Vedantic thinking about evolution. That something is there already which unfolds. And I may have said before, it was worth repeating, this term evolution means unfolding. We have to be careful with it. Because if something's unfolding, it must be there in the beginning. In fact, there must be no beginning. If you want to take a paper parcel and unwrap it, you unwrap it, then the parcel was there in the beginning. In nature, we find this, that a seed evolves into a tree. It doesn't end the story there. Then the tree begets another seed and the cycle continues. So in this Vedanta point of view, in this Eastern point of view, we find that nature, the universe, the whole cosmos, regardless of how many versions of it are there, are all going on eternally. No beginning, no end, eternally there, but only activated by virtue of a proximity of an entity that lends its intelligence, as it were, that has its intelligence reflected. And so the total knowledge that we are looking for is not only the scientific knowledge of Prakriti, but we're also looking for the mystic knowledge of the knower, what religion calls God. Not God as an overseer, not God as a tyrant, not God as the old man in the sky, not the God of Genesis, who is now forgetful and is a little senile, so we have to do everything for him. Not that kind of God, not an extra cosmic creator entity. No, not that kind of God. But some entity that projects the universe from itself and enters into it. And in entering into it, manifests all these glory. Those who attended the earlier meditation the theme was this grace that is unfolding. How do we know that this entity is there? Because we know, firstly, just logically, that chemicals by themselves cannot jump around and self-coordinate. The self-coordinating aspect is not there with mere chemicals. To the extent that an intelligent man, more than the chemicals, is able to arrange and manipulate the chemicals and create different chemical combinations. Even new elements have been created in the laboratory. Man's cleverness right now is trying to find how to create an antidote or how to create some kind of inoculum for this COVID-19 virus. Man's ingenuity is there. Please don't tell me it's merely chemicals jumping with chemicals, that we are in the language of the author of a book called The Selfish Gene, way back in the 1976, that we are mere lumbering robots. There's something that we know is wrong with us. Not even those stating it believe it. And so this 13th chapter tells us how to make this separation between this field and this knower of the field. How is it related to freedom? Well, you see, it says, the eagle glides with broad wingspan. Against what? Against the surrounding space of infinite sky. When we seek to know something, we have to look at the boundaries. Boundary infers a lack of freedom. Let us take, for example, if on a whiteboard you put a small spot, two things you'll notice. The small spot that's been arranged and the broader background to it, the whiteboard itself. We can go further, of course. The whiteboard occupies a room. The room occupies a house. The house is in the midst of a village within a country within the globe within the solar system. We can go on infinitely, of course. Wherever you look and whatever knowledge you seek, the inference is there's always more, there's always more, there's always more. So we can only understand infinity conceptually by thinking of something like the sky or looking into the darkness of space. Then we get possibly a hint. What is this infinity? Because our freedom does not allow, our life, say, does not allow us to think beyond the concepts that we know, the learned information that we have, that gets stored in an unconscious area, a kind of library that we bring out. And if it doesn't match, if something new doesn't match our concepts, we get very puzzled. We like to have the familiar things. This is a strand of binding. This is a strand that makes us prisoners. This is what we call slavery, because it gives us limitations. Nevertheless, we have this impulse for freedom, and there is, when we look at this sky that implies infinity to us, Imagine the bluest of blue skies, and the heart gets a certain elevation. We get an inspiration. We get an association with something that is our deepest aspiration, namely freedom, the infinite freedom, timelessness. Now, of course, nobody has the choice. Nobody has unlimited choice. If you say we have free choice, well, yes, but nobody by themselves can fly. We may aspire to it. In youth, people may develop cardboard wings and jump off the garden shed. And they get quite a lesson from it in bruises and so on. At its worst, maybe a broken arm or leg. We hope not. So just imitating a bird in flight doesn't do it. We haven't got the freedom to fly. And when we see a bird soaring like this, and an eagle has such a magnificent wide wingspan, and if you've ever seen an eagle glide, very rarely does it flap its wings. It flaps a little bit and then has the intelligence, the inherent intelligence to catch a current of air. And when it catches a current air, we can see just wings still outspanned. Just a small dip here or a small dip there in order for it to adjust to currents. But we admire this wonderful flight. And I don't know anybody who hasn't aspired in some way to flying. I wish I could fly. If you ask people, please give me a wish list of things that you want to do and have no limitations whatsoever on it. On that list somewhere will be, I wish to fly without wings. In our dreams, we can do it, of course. And often people have dreams like that. But you see, the wonderful freedom that we see in an eagle is misleading. It's misleading because that eagle is only flying for one purpose and may get a certain joy in catching the currents under the wings. But really, where's its attention? Its eagle eye, an eye that is much, much more accurate than the human eye, has such an incredible range. At several kilometers distance, it can pinpoint a running rabbit, some kind of target. It can immediately see. It catches the movement. And with this eye that is developed far and above our own evolutionary eye, it is able to catch the prey. That's what it's looking for. For itself, yes, partly, because we are bound to eat. We have no choice about it. And then we find that maybe it has young in a nest somewhere high up in the mountains. And so it's looking to catch something and then give it to the young. One of the most regal eagles that I have seen, that I know of, I find in Africa. In Africa, we have a great, great eagle there that swoops down on the water and catches fish and then takes it off, has such a wonderful way of catching it, is able not only to see the movement in the water, but with pinpoint accuracy and timing, immediately catch it with its claws and fly off with it. Where is it flying to? It's flying to its nest. And there it has children of its own. Now, don't ask me if eagles have domestic arguments and all that. That's another thing. But if they do, then that's another form of being bound, you see. I'm choosing to exercise some instinct, the instinct for procreation and the instinct for feeding, for eating, sleeping, perpetuating life. And it's these two instincts that Sri Ramakrishna puts into the language of women and gold, or men and gold, or lust and greed. These two things are the things that bind us. because our attention is steered outward. We are told, Katha Upanishad tells us how somehow the eyes and ears and all the senses and all that are like pierced openings, and man peers at the world through that. But one wise man or one wise person reverts that and looks inward, and there discovers this very freedom that one is looking for. So such sights will make us question why. Because no matter how much we scheme and plan to become free, and I think if you examine your life, you'll find that this is the case. We make all kinds of plans and schemes for the future. Now you may say much of this is to do with happiness, but happiness and freedom are co-equal values in a sense. And then involved in that is freedom of choice. And also we can choose different options. So we can exercise a free will to this extent that we can choose whether we should invest our mental energy in one line or the other, whether we should put it in prayesh or shreyas, something that is preferable, or something that is pleasurable. These are the various choices that we are given. And life presents us with the theoretical alternatives, but in practice, unless we have trained our mind, unless we have some intellectual conception well-founded, the chances are we'll allow our feelings, our impulses, to make the choice for us. Is this not also slavery? So we look to the future to get a better future because we are sure that now is not perfect. Since we are not free now, we're looking for our freedom. Since we're not happy now, we're looking for our happiness. Since we are not fully satisfied now, we look for satisfaction in the future. And it may take various forms. So it goes on. For this ideal, we are prepared to die. There are people who are prepared to die for their cause of freedom, political freedom, or freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is such a value now in some Western countries that you can pretty much say anything. You can insult anybody and shout from the rooftops anything you like, theoretically. But we know you haven't really got the freedom to do that. Because if you declare from the rooftops that you're going to murder people, you'll soon be arrested, either for psychiatric treatment or to thwart your intention. And after all, this freedom doesn't prohibit morality. You can't do a crime and get arrested, and somebody says, I was only exercising my right to freedom. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita only gives us one right, the right to work. And so for this ideal, we are prepared to die. Freedom's cry above all else placed. We value it so highly, and we get very irate when freedoms are curtailed. Yet every step brings captives' cry. Every step we make toward freedom gives us a certain pain and threats are faced. The more we seek the freedom through these means of getting it, through, in this language, prakriti, the more we tie ourselves up in knots. Why is that? It's because in order to understand this philosophy, and therefore to conduct your life in a suitable way, it's absolutely necessary to understand the concept of gunas. Guna are ropes that bind. They're not exactly qualities, because qualities have to go with something, some kind of substance. You can't say, give me 2 cups of whiteness. That won't make any sense. But Swami, what is it? White milk, white paint? What do you want? So there has to be something that goes with it. So there are three evolutionary forces that are going on. And these three evolutionary forces we call gunas. And these gunas are binding elements. Supposing you engender the highest, sattva, then you may be reborn, of course, as a celestial or as a completely accomplished and free human. Or you take the lowest value, classified as tamas, ignorance, laziness, etc., lethargy, and so on, all these dark impulses that hide things the most. Then you're likely to be born as an animal or something, or a bird. And if you have this mixture, you're likely to be born as an average kind of human. In any event, we have to get out of the cycle of samsara. And unless we do that, we cannot even think that we are free. But all of this is assuming one thing. All of us is assuming that we are Prakriti. All of this is assuming that we have an identity that is within a small range of maneuvering, something called body and mind. What is Prakriti? Body. And body means all the objects of the body. Body only has understanding and knowledge through the sense organs. The objects are included in this. And these objects are materials out of which eyes and ears and all the senses are made anyhow. So we say that, but eagle's graceful flights are made so sharp eagle eye can target food. Anxious for chicks from eggs it laid, restless to feed its hungry brood. You know, if we take this as a kind of analogy for the mind and see what is the hungry brood in the mind, there are mouths continuously open within us. We want to have all kinds of things. We are replaying our childhood, I want, I want, I want. Just on an adult footing, that's all. So I want this, I want that, I want a new car, I want a new job. And all these wants are there. And then there are other desires, more subtle. I want to be liked. I want to be rewarded. I want to be thanked. These kinds of things. These are also desires. And they have to be fed. So we find all our freedom is curtailed by our efforts to sustain our life. And then we still think we should struggle to be free. And every struggle increases our bondage because we don't know necessarily how to manipulate these three gunas. And this is very key, how to promote these values. Earlier in the 13th chapter, we had a whole list of values, from humility to modesty to detachment to all kinds of things were there that enabled us to engender this quality of goodness and truth, these noble things. This is the Bhagavad Gita's version of Patanjali's yam and niyam, controls and purificatory actions, because amongst there would be study of scripture as well and all these other various things. So we have this anxiousness and this restlessness in us, and if you think it's not the case, then monitor yourself today and look back on the time you had today and count up how many times even a small feeling of anxiety arose. And if this came up in your mental field, then know that this is binding you, because we cannot gain freedom. Why cannot we not gain freedom? Because we are free already. We are already free. So if we are free, if the statement I've made is true, and the statement that the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and all these texts say is true, then, and we don't know this fact, then what will happen? We too will hope to gain some kind of fanciful flight. This is a good beginning aspiration. We should aspire for the mind to fly as high as it can. And accepting our own lockdown lot. Today, most people are under lockdown. Hopefully, it'll be released sooner or later. But even when these restrictions are lifted, what will we find? We'll find we're still not free. In fact, we're probably more bound than ever, because we now are bound toward jobs, routines, an economy that we have to now take great care and effort to revive, and all of these things. And it catches us up again, unless we have a different attitude toward it. And so full free we are, and perfect soul. That's the declaration. This Purusha that we're talking about in this 13th chapter is this perfect soul. We don't have to look for perfection, it's already there. Our mental flights will tell us so. Whenever our mental flights soar off in meditations or in actions which connect us to the deepest reality and expressions of love to our supreme lover, a personal God, every time this happens, we take an inward flight. The mind transcends, as it were, this mundane world. So there's no need to search. We just play the role. And when you play the role, you have the freedom to do it. Staying blissful as scenes come and go. We give an example then of freedom. Supposing I want to learn a musical instrument and I start playing, let's say a piano. I haven't played before, so the first thing that happens is fear. I'm fearful of playing it. Now, if I leave that where it is, I'll never even start. And so I overcome this fear by practice. I practice some basic notes and structures. Practice means I do it repeatedly, until it becomes, I can do it, even with eyes closed, I can do some basic playing. And so we have to have fortitude. We have to have forbearance. We overcome our fear in this way. So ultimately, we come to then faith. Faith that we have the capacity to play and the ability to play. Faith that we will stumble, but eventually through practice we'll get there. Faith because other people did it, and I'm no different from them. You know, you get people who say, oh, I can't do it. No, you can do it. You may not want to do it. You may not like to do it. That's the only thing. But if you want to do it, and if you like to do it, if you're enthused to do it, then you can do it. But it requires practice. Everything requires practice. Then as you practice, maybe even for years and years together, you have the freedom. Freedom because you can play any tune you like, because you mastered this instrument. And having mastered this instrument, instead of playing some basic tunes, with eyes closed, you can meander over the keyboard. But here's the thing. You have the freedom to play anything you like, and you have the freedom not to play also. You have the freedom to walk away and do other things. That's true freedom. So it would be a mistake to think that freedom is going off into a state of samadhi. Go off into this nirikalpa samadhi like a salt gull disappearing in the ocean. Why not come back as retaining a little of the ego and bring others with you? So this is the whole idea. So let us now, with that background, pick up a little bit of where we left off. And just to recap a few things also. So it was stated that this knowledge of the field, kshetra, knowledge, and that which has to be known has been briefly described before, and is described very briefly, picking up the various 24 categories of the Samkhyas. This in a nutshell is Prakriti. And then was described in an impossible way what is termed as Purusha, Brahman, or Kshatrajna, the knower of the field. Impossible because it's beyond the range of observation. You cannot have any idea about it, no more than you can have a real tangible feeling through the senses of infinite. Infinite is a major problem in physics, for example. In mathematical calculations, when you get to an infinite, it's the one sure sign that something is wrong with your model. And so, if you know all this, both these two types of knowledge, then Krishna says, my devotee, that is still love of God, the one that loves God, is fitted for my state. If we want to be fit for our freedom, for this revelation, then we have to have this knowledge. Some people think the Bhagavad Gita's 13th chapter was very high philosophy. We can't really easily understand this whole thing, knower, feel, etc., etc. It's not our normal experience. Our normal experience is getting up, having breakfast, going to work, coming back, and relaxing and watching the television. That's our normal experience. All this high philosophy, but it's not. You see, it's our own experience. When we perceive anything, two things are necessary: this perceiver and the thing that is perceived. We covered this before. And then briefly, the concept goes on, know that Prakriti and Purusha are both without beginning. So it goes, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Vijnanadi Ubhavapi Vikarams Cha Gunams Chaiva Vidhi Prakriti Sambhavan. Know that Prakriti and Purusha are both without beginning. And know also that all these modifications and these evolutionary forces that we call gunas are born of Prakriti. These are things like ropes that bind us. That's what's stopping our freedom. And so this we covered, in just a review of this. And then it says about the causes. It said, and we mentioned last week as well, just to renew your memories of this, Karya Karana Kartate Hetu Prakriti Uchate Purushaha Sukha Dukkanam Bhoktatve Hetu Uchate. In the production of this body and the senses, Prakriti is said to be the cause. It's not in a sense, the cause of pain. The enjoyer, the witness, the one that is involved in it, is the one that's registering pain. Because as we know, Prakriti is just chemicals. Prakriti is inert matter, activated by Purusha. And so for that reason, it says that in the experience of pleasure and pain, Purusha is said to be the cause. See, this is a wonderful scriptural language. I'm not saying it, it is said. Others have said it. In other words, it's not new, and therefore it's validated by others. They say it's true. Now, Sri Ramakrishna mentions this, just to recap a little bit, plenitudes and blessings such as Brahmajnana and the bliss of Brahman come to us mortals because of the gracious mediation of this Mahamaya. This we covered. And then we asked the question, in what manner is the Jivatman educated by Prakriti? And we came to this conclusion, and we developed the theme of the seed of the mundane life. We said that Purusha seated in Prakriti experiences the gunas, and the gunas are born of this Prakriti. The entire composition of Prakriti is gunas, and attachment to these essential substances and qualities is the cause of birth in good and evil wombs. This is the cause of our bondage, our lack of freedom. Now we also mentioned here Upadrastha numanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwaraha paramatmeti chapyokto dehisman purusha paraha. The Supreme Purusha in this body is also called spectator. He's like an umpire watching a game of tennis. He's able to judge and observe, sitting at an elevated position, what's going on. That is within you. And then we mentioned last week the idea of waking dream and dreamless states and how there's a witness of those also. Is the one who permits, without its permission, the game doesn't take place. We can view it as a game of tennis. Without the permission that you can use the grounds, that the court should be in this way, the laws and so on and so forth, then nothing takes place. And the supporter, you can say, if you use the analogy of a game of tennis, it's like the sponsor. This is all supported and encouraged. Come on, please play the game. I'm supporting you, just as the earth supports us, just as gravity supports the cluster of things to make things tangible and solid to us so that we can play our role. So is the support of everything. Supporting my breath, supporting by providing all the resources around me. God's grace supporting me. And one who experiences, because it's not the Prakriti that's experiencing. And then the great Lord and the Supreme Self, that is one over and above, transcendent over everything, one who's designing, who's arranging. So all of these things are there, and Sri Ramakrishna's comment is also there. The universe has come into being as a result of the union of the Purusha and Prakriti. He endorses it. And do you know how it functions? Then he gives an example. The master of the family is seated somewhere, absorbed in some serious thought, and the housewife busies herself running here and there, attending to all the details of the affairs of the household. And now and then she acquaints her husband, they have a small dialogue and seek agreement, and everything gets approved. And so it goes on. And so we have this interplay between, as it were, Purusha and Prakriti. This is a kind of marriage. And that is why we put it in our mythology and our theology as male and female. For every representative deity, say Shiva or Vishnu or any number of deities like this, there is always an accompanying Shakti. Even in the incarnations we find it. Rama has his Sita, Krishna has his Radha, and so on. And in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, there we have Sharada Devi. Now here's the thing. This is the most telling thing now. Ya evam veti purusham prakritim cha gunai saha sarvata vartamanopi naso bhuya vijayati. He who knows, that is you and I, if we know this Purusha and Prakriti together with the gunas, and I can put how to manipulate them in order to snap the bondage, is never born again in whatever way he may live. It doesn't matter if you're a monk, if you're a householder, it doesn't matter if you're a housewife, it doesn't matter if you are poor, it doesn't matter if you're rich, it doesn't matter if you're low caste, it doesn't matter if you're high caste, it doesn't matter if you're no caste, it doesn't matter if you're born in Japan, it doesn't matter if you are versed in scripture, it doesn't matter if you have a university degree, it doesn't matter if you're illiterate. If you know this, then you will not be born again. That is, you will have had your freedom. Because what does this bondage make? It makes us go on and on and on and on, looking for the freedom that we assume is not there. Once we realize, oh, it's there, it was never lost. Maybe people say, so what are you doing in religious life? I'm looking for God. The next question, of course, is he lost? And then let's panic. We never knew he was lost. I hope we find him soon. So it's not like that. Now, here's the interesting thing and very important thing. And before I go on to that, let's see what Sri Ramakrishna has to say here. He says, when the unburnt pots get damaged, the potter makes new pots out of them. But when a pot burnt in a kiln breaks, the broken pieces are rejected as useless. Similarly, he says, the man in ignorance is to be born and reborn. But that man whose karma is burnt out by the fire of knowledge is not reborn. He enters the absolute. In other words, all your karma gets dissolved. Be it the prarabdha karma, be it sanchita karma, all of these gets dissolved. Now, how do we break this bondage? First of all, it's good to know there's nothing really to break since we are free already. It's just an apparent bondage. How do we get rid of this? You see, Swami Vivekananda emphasized 4 yogas. But all he was doing was echoing the words of his guru and the sentiments of his guru. And here, some 5,000 years ago, we find Sri Krishna bringing these 4 paths out, these 4 yogas. He mentions 3 in the first stanza we're about to read. So he says, Jnanena tvani pashyanti kechid atmanam atmana anye samkyena yogena karma yogena cha pare. By jnanena, by meditation. You can do this by meditation. Earlier on, we had a guided meditation. Of course, all meditation is guided. If there's no external person on YouTube or somewhere else to guide your meditation, when you sit, you yourself are guiding it. You're taking yourself on a journey that ends up in a glorious stabilization, a sense of poise at blissful base. Now, what should we meditate on? Many people ask this question. We don't know. We knew what we should meditate on yesterday, but today we drew a blank. But you see, we have this beautiful statement here. It goes, see, yata abhimata dhyanatva. On anything that is pleasing, says Patanjali. This is in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the 39th sutra of the first section, first chapter. Anything that is pleasing. It could be a scene. It could be a pleasant memory that is aesthetic in its value. So this gives enormous freedom. Not only do we have the freedom to choose any one of 4 approaches, but within the approaches, we have enormous flexibility. This is democracy in religion at its very height. You are free to choose. So by meditation, some behold the self in the self by the self. What does it mean? You use self so many times. What does it mean? And both terms are Atman. No. Some behold the self, that is the inner Atman, that is the Purusha. They do it by the self. By what? By the mind. They do this by the small Jivatman, the small self. And others by the yoga of knowledge. That is the yoga of knowledge, that is Jnana Yoga. And yet others by Karma Yoga. Now what happens when you do all these things? In the next verse we are told about Bhakti Yoga. So before we go on there, let's see what are the things, the gifts that we have from these 4 approaches. And should we just practice one or the other? It depends on you. but assess what are the benefits. Meditation sharpens the mind. Meditation sharpens the attention. Meditation gives the mind a direction and a discipline. Jnana Yoga, so it stimulates the mind. Jnana Yoga also sharpens the mind, makes it think. Imagine now in a secular way. Supposing in your old age you're worried about getting Alzheimer's or something like that. Then what people will say, or some diminishing faculty, mental faculty, keep the mind active, get a hobby, and use the mind for puzzles. Keep the mind highly active, learn something new every day. Now, if you use this faculty to discern fully this kshetra and kshetrajna, don't forget, he who knows this Purusha and Prakriti together with the gunas faculty, not only in judging what's the right thing to do, but in discovering what has value. Should we invest our mental energy in one way or the other? Should we agree with the various saints that address the mind, oh my mind, and give it a choice? You can go in this direction or that direction. Which do you choose? And then sit back and evaluate correctly. So not only honing your mental skills, and then karma yoga makes you efficient. It gives you skill in action. It allows you to act as you have to mostly in this waking world, where you're involved in a job or career or whatever it is, or students. Then don't make it stressful. Make it efficient. And with this efficiency comes equilibrium of mind, calmness of mind. You're not upset. No anxiety takes place. Doing actions in this present moment. Does it end there? No. We have covered 3 of the yogas. The 4th goes like this. Anye tvevam ajanataha sutta nyebhya upasati. Tepicha titarantya deva mrityam shruti parayana. So, still others, apart from those 3. And why should we have a separate stanza for this? Still others, not knowing, thus, worship as they have heard from others, Guru, Scripture, those who are saints and mystics, those whose face shines. They too go beyond death by their devotion to what they have heard. Some examples of that. The gopis of Vrindavan, said to be uneducated, devoid of intellectual equipment, so to speak, just out of sheer love, sheer attachment for Krishna, exhibiting all the attachment that you have for a loved one. This is the easiest way. This employs our inherent feeling. Don't tell me you're not suited to it, because every day you exhibit some emotion of some kind. And emotion is just an energy that you can. And this gives us the ability to express our emotions. This gives an outlet for our pent-up frustrations. And so for this reason, it seemed to be the easiest. But what makes it easier still? To practice in an integral way, all of them, knowing that there are benefits to all. And this will help balance any extremes. So among the 4 yogas, Bhakti Yoga is the easiest. That we understood in the preceding chapter, chapter 12. Scriptural knowledge and keen discrimination are not necessary auxiliaries to this all-absorbing path. But the gopis of Vrindavan who were uneducated, devoid of intellectual equipment, says the commentary here. Still, through pure devotion, they made the Lord of the universe their own. But if learning and wisdom can be properly used, and if pure devotion is also side by side developed, progress in spirituality becomes easier still, because we're employing our natural faculties. Now, Sri Ramakrishna has this to say: devotion to the Lord may be compared to a ferocious tiger. As this tiger destroys the cattle, then the former, that is the tiger, destroys lust, greed, and such like enemies to man. If bhakti comes up but once, there's no more fear of being disturbed by lust and anger, which will all be exterminated from the mind. The gopis of Vrindavan were free from these taints because of their extraordinary love of the boy Krishna. This discrimination has to take place regardless of the path you're on, but it takes different forms with different yogas. Renunciation has to take place as the key to all this growth and advancement and discovery. But the beauty of Bhakti Yoga is no direct attack has to be made. If you want to, in my famous example, if you want to conquer your shadow, then no amount of attacking it, ambushing it, hitting it with an arrow, stamping on it, cursing at it, will remove the shadow. Now, I use the term shadow because shadow is Western psychology's speech for all your compulsions, all your demons, all your inner demons, all your inner wounds, all the things that you want to ignore, but they're there, lingering, tugging, tempting, pulling. If you want to overcome all of this psychological shadow, then you can't attack it directly. You walk toward the sun, and the shadow obediently follows afterwards. Walk toward God, express your love there, deepen your love there, and all these other things follow. Nothing to renounce in a direct way, nothing to give up, but only everything to be attracted toward. Walking toward this, saturating the mind only with this love. Not a human kind of love, a divine kind of love. We can open ourselves up, and in doing so, the jnana, the knowledge that we are seeking, comes to us also, says Krishna. So, in my enthusiasm, I lost our place now. But anyhow, let's go back a little bit. So, and in any event, our time is almost up. Our time is pretty much up. But I want to prompt us to the next stanza, because actually the whole number of stanzas in this chapter is actually only some 34 stanzas. And so we are now on the 26th. So we really don't have many more to go. And many of these stanzas left will be reinforcing. When repetition and reinforcement is done, it means that the Bhagavad Gita and scripture understands that we don't catch a point very easily. It may come in and go out. We may think we understand it and nod our heads. But actually, to really deeply absorb means not just to practice it, but to understand at the deepest level these truths, so that it becomes an automatic action. Automatic, it becomes settled on a habit level. And so the next stanza will give us gaining in unity is freedom. Our subject tonight was freedom. So gaining in unity is freedom. This is an important statement to finish off with. What is a definition of freedom? Freedom is gaining in unity. When we understand that there's only one thing, one entity, then this is freedom. I look forward to seeing you next week and at our various programs. For those in Northern Ireland, we have a Zoom study group tomorrow evening. And otherwise, throughout the week, on Saturday mornings, we have yoga in the morning. And in the afternoon, we have reflections on Life of Holy Mother by Swami Vimokshananda, which I encourage everybody to tune into and attend. Same thing on Sunday, we have in the morning a live interaction on Zoom, the Vedanta series, where people are free to ask their questions. And then in the evening, we have again reflections and teachings from the Gospel of Ramakrishna by Swami Vimokshananda. All this is occurring live on the YouTube, so I'd encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.